Welcome to Syntax. We got a really interesting one for you today. A couple of weeks ago, Coinbase came out and said that they are writing 40% of their code with AI. And I thought that was really interesting because you hear these stories of like, yeah, you have these like brain dead vibe coders pooping out an app in an afternoon. And then you hear stories like Google says like 80% of their code or something. And when I talk to people at Google and they say, yeah, we're just converting Angular apps to like a more modern version or something like that, you know? So I'm always so curious when companies come out and say, we are writing X% of our code with AI. I'm so curious. I just want to be like, but what are you using? Like, what tools are you using? What are you using it for? What kind of code are you writing? You know, I want to get into the nitty gritty. So Coinbase, not a small company, rather large company, you know, lots at stake, lots of financial, has come out and said that they're writing 40%, hoping to get to 50% of their code with AI. And I immediately was like, we got to get somebody on. And it turns out, I do you remember, Kyle, we went out for beers many years ago in Toronto?
I think it was Toronto JS. It was quite a while ago, yeah.
Yeah, so I went to message you and I was like, oh, I think I know this guy already. So welcome, Kyle. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I, remember that time fondly. And then ever since then, I think I follow you on Instagram for lately home improvement tips and, general DIY inspiration. So definitely have, moved through the sphere of influence in my personal feed.
Oh, that's great. But was it you that told me the story about Walmart and toilet paper?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So this guy is responsible for the spooky story episodes that we do every single October, which is we tell horror stories and whatnot. And he told me this story. I'm not sure if we can get into it, but I appreciate you telling us that because it jogged my memory, and I was like, we got to do Syntax on this. It's really good.
Yeah. A good episode about testing in production would be a good theme there.
Cool. Well, who are you and what do you do at Coinbase?
So my name's Kyle. I've been at Coinbase for about 4 or 5 years now. And currently I'm leading a developer experience team that is so, I guess, tasked focused on this sphere of AI enablement. So how do we enable engineers across Coinbase to use AI, to leverage AI for their coding tasks, for their developer productivity tasks, kind of all along the sphere of the work before the work during the work, and then ensuring quality all throughout. So the time at Coinbase has been filled with different experiences as the company has changed in size and shape, and currently quality is one of our leading initiatives that we've been so focused on. So as we're exploring AI, we're doing so with very strong guardrails for quality. And so, I'm really excited to talk about, I think, how we're approaching AI enablement as well as safety and how that ultimately impacts the developer productivity down the road.
Yeah, when you say quality, could you give the audience an idea of like, what is that like? How do you even quantify quality?
Yeah. So at a large company, quality has many different shapes and sizes. We are always laser focused on our customer. So trying to measure from the customer perspective what quality looks like. And obviously, as the company grows, you can feel further away from the customer. You can have a lot of noise throughout the system. So there's obviously some high level metrics around incident severity and kind of outer loop impacts. But then on the inside impacts, the inner loop impacts, we're looking at how developers are, I guess, able to test, able to kind of go through their checklists of what is the bar that we're holding. And so we have service scorecards. We have all sorts of, I guess, internal measures that we give to developers to kind of, stay at a certain high bar. But what quality really boils down to is, can a developer use a tool frictionless, painlessly? Like, we all love our tools. And ultimately, I think that's where the quality starts, is if you're using a quality tool, you're going to have quality output. That's kind of my thesis. And so as we're kind of, enabling AI and enabling other kind of developer productivity wins along the way, we've done a lot of work around, our internal build systems and how we are building apps at scale. We want the tools to be really high quality. And then ultimately we want really fast iteration speeds. We want quick deployments. all the observability inputs that we kind of need in order to gauge the success of our systems.
Okay, so let's probably people are dying to hear. Let's dig into this. Is like you say 40% of code is written in AI. So are your developers just boop 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 in the box, pooping out a whole
Hitting
bunch
the tab
of
key,
code and then ship it? You know, like it probably not, given that like the stakes of what Coinbase is, right?
Yeah. When we're talking about lines of code, specifically in that metric that I think everyone's pretty aware of, we're talking about lines added or deleted. So one of the first pieces of critique that we kind of get on this is this shouldn't just be adding code to a code base. As you add more code, complexity increases, quality usually diminishes. These are all pretty correlated metrics. So, lines added, deleted, as developers are, using their AI tools. Look, like I kind of want to, move back and talk about the tenets of AI for developers. Yeah. The key tenets that I kind of have in my mind is AI should always be attributed. So we are essentially asking these systems to produce code on developers' behalf. So developers are still taking responsibility for the code that is produced. So strong attribution is kind of a key tenet. Along those lines, AI should never be making decisions. AI should never be kind of the final piece between a feature and the customer. So everything that I guess these lines of code are producing is merely a suggestion. It falls into the review steps that we all know as software engineers we're able to interact with every day. So if code is produced, it goes into review. And this is actually where I think one of the key problems around AI and velocity is going to emerge down the future is code review. You need really strong code review these days when it comes to flagging potential risks, having good quality rules, through your kind of like lint type, all, the kind of quality build system.
Yeah.
And then ultimately having the right approvers to say, yes, this is the right code, we're going to ship it to production, and then lean on all the strong parts of the deployment flow. So I wouldn't say that the code that we're writing is going straight to production. We have a lot of really high quality guardrails intact that ensure that the right feature is landing in front of customers.
What does that actually look like? So let's say a dev in your company gets a ticket to add a feature to your dashboard. What does the like start to end look like for a developer that is writing the code, maybe even the PM before that of figuring out what to do, all the way through to like who's code reviewing it, testing it, security, etc.?
The different ways that AI is used, I think, indicates how comfortable developers are with AI. So we kind of introduce tools along the way. So you kind of talk about from ticket to code. We in some cases have product managers that are creating really robust tickets, and perhaps they're leveraging AI to do that. So they're culminating a bunch of different docs together, perhaps using some sort of inputs to create a really high quality ticket. And in some cases, we have workflows where that ticket can be worked on by Claude, can be worked on by an agent, essentially picked up right away. And that agent will work in the background, push a branch to GitHub, at which point it lands in kind of the traditional review flow. I'd say that's the future that we're aiming for, is this kind of, it'd be great if 60% of our work ticket-wise could be kind of just done by a background agent. And where the attribution piece comes in here is, there's an engineer that's kind of responsible for maintaining these background agents for their PMs. There's PMs who, feel compelled enough to just author code. And this has always been allowed in systems, is if you're a product manager and you want GitHub access, you want to end up in the review flow and kind of triage that all the way through, we let that happen. So this is where the lines are blurry, but they've also always existed. And so that's probably the case that we're aiming for. I'd say the day-to-day piece where developers are using Cursor, using Claude Code, using any of our kind of other agents that we allow within Coinbase, they might be using it in tab completion mode, which is probably the most fine-grained control of the code that you're writing. And then there's agent mode, obviously, that is kind of fully agentic. And there's different levels of enablement there. We can either turn on YOLO mode and let the agent kind of develop however it wants. But yeah, I'm going to kind of go back to my original point. All of this code gets to this review step, and at that point, it's kind of the same step throughout of strong developer review, strong testing, quality bars. So how the code gets there, I think is enabled in different ways, but ultimately there's the traditional steps that the code has to fall in before it gets to production.
Yeah. I'm curious about, I mean, you mentioned a lot of different types of tools here. Is everybody on the same set of tools? And are those mandated from up high in terms of like, you're using Cursor, you're using, VS Code, you're using Claude Code, etc.?
Yeah. So Cursor is a really high quality tool. We were early to use Cursor middle of last year. And it's just so powerful because what I talked about earlier, where it's blurring the lines for what is an engineer. We have product managers, we have data science, we have all sorts of users throughout the company who are going to Cursor as kind of their first place to say, hey, I have some code in a GitHub repository and I want to chat with it. I don't really know exactly what I'm doing, but I just want to do some data visualization, get some understanding. I just want to learn a little bit more. So Cursor is kind of the all integrated solution that I think just about 100% of our engineering and plus a good handful of our PMs and other job functions are using. Claude Code, we have some custom tooling that enables Claude Code. We have other tools that we're kind of exploring internally, such as Goose, Codex, other kind of open source alternatives. And really what we don't want to happen is for us to go too deep on a tool and then we all know how the AI story is unraveling. There's a new tool tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we stay on top of that is we kind of have these good primitives that let us pull in the models with the right sorts of context. All developers are encouraged to use these. I wouldn't say that there's strong mandatory enablement, but yeah, it's definitely, I think everyone wants to use them. And our MCP culture kind of backs it up too. We have so many MCPs that teams have kind of created these custom agents with. So they might be, running an agent inside of a Docker environment that calls different MCPs, and those are now passed around from team to team saying, oh, I automated this really, unique on-call situation. And now that's just kind of exploding as this kind of sourdough starter bespoke, configuration.
That's really interesting to me because I'm always curious about like how do large companies who have probably a lot of domain specific stuff inside of their company that is only for their company. I'm like, how do you make AI work for that? So you're saying like you're making all these MCP servers that help. Do you have any examples of stuff you could share?
Yeah, so we have probably 30 or 40 developer-facing MCPs today from all the tools that we use.
Cool.
Things like Datadog, PagerDuty, all of the kind of internal suite of tools that we use. And it's wild just the amount of creativity that we're seeing. And our kind of approach is enablement. It's not prescriptive. You have to use this tool in this specific way. So we have all these, agents that I was mentioning, but then we also have like LangChain, LangGraph internally that teams are starting to really write super robust, fully agentic flows. This is kind of the catalyst effect that's happening as every time we add a new MCP integration, someone runs to that and says, I've been waiting for this. It unlocks this bespoke flow that I've been doing. And yeah, the excitement around these like tools is really, really new. I don't think we've ever had so many developers clamoring for Python in production, in production in the sense of producing a production internal instance. But we've never had so many devs that are just running towards new domains because they're saying, cool, I can work with LangChain, LangGraph because I use Cursor, because I can now kind of iterate in a new language that I wasn't fully comfortable with before.
Yeah, that's amazing. I I'm curious on your take on this. I've noticed that when I'm switching tools, they interact with agents in a different way, and I'm having to translate it across tools. Do you find that MCP is a more solid surface to be able to keep those tools in rather than using and adapting custom agents for whatever tool you're using at any given day?
MCP is not a perfect, it's not a perfect abstraction. I think it's and it's such an interesting world where I think you've seen even so many vendors saying we have an MCP available now. And it's kind of this overused term. It's like, it's just a protocol. It's just a way that, you're interacting with a service remotely in a very generalized way. But then, you see agents like Claude Code that natively call GitHub, for example. And that is a much tighter way for agents to work, is just to call an API directly rather than proxy through an MCP that it has to kind of figure out what to do with. So I think as developers are kind of transferring through tools, this is where there might be very specialized use cases where it makes sense to go deep on a tool integration and use the native API instead of an MCP. But broadly, I think a lot of our tasks are generic enough to where MCPs are kind of, letting us prototype really fast, letting us use something instantly in a really easy format. But if something gains more adoption, if say we produce an agent that does really unique bug triaging, for example, we might move away from an MCP and move towards a direct API call just to get that, even finer level of control. It's kind of the 1-2 automate philosophy that we've used at Coinbase of, we're going to prototype everywhere. Cool. Someone else likes it. And now we're going to make it into a production thing. And that's in general, I think, how DevX, my team, kind of works is we see what this team is doing in one part of the company that might be a more ambitious part of the company or, less regulated part of the company. Man, it's just exploding over there. It's doing great. All these hundreds of developers are now enabled. How can we bring that to other parts of the company to fit their kind of compliance profile in a very safe way? And trying to up level the I guess innovation to other parts of the company is kind of a key part of working at this company at scale.
And what kind of code are you primarily writing with AI? Like, is this React components and CSS, or is this like back-end code? And like, I don't even know, what is the stack of Coinbase?
Yeah, so we're primarily, React, TypeScript in the front end, and very heavily Go on the back end. Traditionally, we were kind of a Ruby shop, and have grown into a Go company over time. There's been a huge push early on to grow test adoption, and this is probably where a giant bulk of our AI code was written early on. Was I want to use Cursor to go and bring in the test coverages that I need. So we started not mandating, but putting out bars in places saying, okay, if you want to use Cursor, if you want to use all these AI tools, you're going to have to meet these certain criteria of test coverages, deployment frequency, scorecards, et cetera. And so teams early on would say, okay, we're below the bar. We're going to write a bunch of tests, and it's one thing to have high test coverage, but it's another thing to have them be very accurate tests. And we've created certain tools for this with providing the right sorts of context, mocks, et cetera, to create really good tests. So early on, a lot of test coverage. I think where we're seeing the bulk of the company write AI generated code today is probably 60% TypeScript. I think that it's just a much more fungible place where we're able to iterate on pretty quickly, and traditionally isn't quite as sensitive secure as some of the more backend systems.
Yeah, and is that like internal tooling, or is that like customer? Like, is the Coinbase
definitely both
.com? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, definitely both. Coinbase.com, it's a pretty highly trafficked repo for AI today.
And how much Go does it write? Or you say it's mostly TypeScript, but does it still dips into Go as well?
Oh yeah. A lot of our backend engineers are using Cursor. It's a static language, and it's actually a pretty simple language. So it's a great use case for AI. Look, again, these are core systems, and in order for these teams to be using AI, we need to keep the quality bar really high. And there's so many different ways to do that, but we're not just letting people vibe code and push to production with backend systems by any means.
Do you find that your AI tools handle some aspects of the code base better than others? Like I know you've mentioned languages specifically, but even as far as languages go,
there's different tools that have done well. So we've heard Solidity devs, some of our kind of like blockchain systems engineers, they were not having great luck with Cursor, and kind of however Cursor is kind of enhanced on their context. So they started using Claude Code, and whatever Claude Code's training data or sampling is from is just a lot higher of a bar for them. It's trained on more Solidity data. So there's different tools that I think map to different code bases pretty well. I think the very generic parts of developers' jobs of setting up a new route, setting up a new screen, the copy and paste of what we were already doing from I want to, create a new route essentially. Very good at that. It's very good at pattern matching and pattern learning. More specialized and like new architecture is not necessarily the place that I would leverage AI. I think pushing it into a place where there's not existing parts of the code base to look at, maybe the best practice that it's proposing is not the best practice that you as an engineer agree with. So letting it write net new is not necessarily the best use case for it.
Interesting, because we get that question all the time, and maybe you could answer this. As someone says, we have an absolutely massive code base. We have strict ways that things need to be done. If someone comes to you and says like, hey, we have this code base that's 15 years old, there's ways that we do it, right? We do have some tooling around it. But how do you get AI to write code that looks and acts like the code that we have been written? Like what would you tell someone to do? Where they fire up Cursor? What tools do you need in order to support that?
Onboarding new tools to existing systems and kind of downloading all the cultural context that you've created is an ongoing task. We've had developers have good success with the Claude MD files or the Cursor rules. Internally, we've created code conventions, kind of AI code conventions that are applied generically to different tools. And historically, this was something that we've always done. 2-3 years ago, we'd have weekly, monthly meetings of senior staff engineers getting together saying, what is the best way to do tests? What is the best way to you use state management? And we'd kind of put it on paper, document it, set it in stone, and preach that throughout the rest of the company. And now we're able to codify that quite well with AI. So it takes time, and there's some tools out there that are doing it quite well in terms of learning about your code conventions over time. Greptile is one review tool that we've started experimenting with in Coinbase, where it actually looks at review comments and it starts to build an internal registry of things that it's reviewed on or things that other developers have called out in review. And so that's where I think the long tail problem is going to be around capturing context in a really nice way. I think the Claude MD file, I've seen a lot of engineers start with that. They say, hey, I got Claude in a code base, it committed a file, maybe it gets updated in the future. Doc writing is something that different teams have always had different levels of success with. How can we automate that with AI to then turn those into AI rules is a conversation and tooling that we're building. But yeah, for teams that are just getting started, it's different levels of success with different AI tools. I think Cursor has its own way of kind of indexing and creating a map of your code base, whereas Claude Code just uses LS everywhere, and it kind of manually crawls your code base. So experiment with the right tool and for the size and shape of your code base is my suggestion.
I'm really excited about the new Go-based TypeScript compiler because I think that given how fast it is, it's going to make the prompts much easier to like kind of spider through the pieces of the code base that it needs.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how that
integrating that with an agent would be really sweet.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time with that.
And if you want to see all of the errors in your application, you'll want to check out Sentry at sentry.io/syntax. You don't want a production application out there that, well, you have no visibility into in case something is blowing up and you might not even know it. So head on over to sentry.io/syntax. Again, we've been using this tool for a long time and it totally rules. All right.
So now that Coinbase is writing 40-50% of its code with AI, do you just fire half of your staff?
Definitely not. So,
Yeah.
So let's talk about velocity. There's always a demand for more velocity. Everyone says we want to create features faster, we want to iterate faster, we want to be hyper competitive. What we hope to see, and this is where the metrics are very hard today. And so, we can talk a little bit about metrics here, where code coverage is probably one of the only finite output metrics that we really have nailed down today. We can say AI code, generated lines of code is going up as AI's usage is going up. On the other side, we have a lot of input metrics. So we have input metrics around what number of AI tokens are engineers using. And, we see that growing at an adoption rate right now. It'll probably get to a resting rate until some sort of tool comes along that consumes twice the amount of tokens. What we really hope to see is developer velocity increase in a very long tail way. And right now there's a lot of issues in that kind of developer velocity story. There's issues around, I as a developer am able to produce 3 PRs a day. Awesome, but reviewing those 3 PRs a day is still just as painful as ever. Or testing those is just as painful as ever. Or, I'm staggering out the deploys because my system, the way that we promote code hasn't really been modernized in a while. So there's all these kind of existing pipeline problems that as you put more code into the wood chipper, you're going to kind of create this backlog downstream. You're going to see these systems not scale well. And that's, I think, what we're really hitting internally right now. The other side of it is engineers are able to focus on more long-term work. They're able to, focus on things that they weren't able to before. Because I had to, produce a feature by the end of the week, but I also had to go and ensure that, our SLO reporting was right, that our customer complaints were addressed, that kind of, triage of our bug tickets happened correctly. So there's all these kind of like work around the work tasks that people are now able to spend more time doing, which hypothetically should increase the quality over time.
Yeah. If you're always putting out fires like that and there's no time to do the deep work, and then the product will suffer.
Exactly. Yeah. So long story short, more code written by AI doesn't necessarily translate to less engineers in the long run. Perhaps it does scale it at some point. Perhaps teams won't be constantly hiring forever because obviously organization building, there reaches a certain sweet spot where, more people they don't solve more problems better. Yeah.
And you mentioned some stuff around code review as well. Like that's a bottleneck right now. And I see it in so many of these open source projects, especially some of the open source projects where it has a very specific skill set. Like I was looking at the OBS WebSocket implementation in C the other day. There's one guy that understands how that works. Mm-hmm. And it's really frustrating because you see all these pull requests of people being like, I don't know C, but I just typed the problem into a box and maybe this works. Let me know, and now there's this huge backlog of like, we've got one guy that knows what he's doing. So is AI helpful in that code review space as well?
Absolutely. So the example of the one engineer who is responsible for an entire open source library. This is everywhere. We adopted Expo early on at Coinbase, and I remember there was like one engineer who maintained a V8 fork for Android. So shout out to Kudo if you are listening, because he's keeping so many code bases alive. But the code review step is probably more important than ever. This is where there's more demand, and there's probably so much opportunity here too. And what code review has traditionally been, especially in open source and kind of very async teams, is okay, on Monday, someone submitted a PR. Awesome. I left some comments. I reviewed it on Wednesday, left a couple more comments. We were going to merge it on Thursday, but then, CI broke, so we're still triaging it. And that's pain. And so what if we could automate 30 to 40% of that? What if we could say, okay, that first round of comments, the low-hanging fruit, just, have AI kind of run through that with these code conventions that we've built, with this knowledge, graph that we've developed. And, how do we kind of like take out the initial round of review? Cool. What if we get to a point where CI and integration is a little flaky, something's breaking in the PR? Why not just have a Claude Code and GitHub Actions bot triage on that?
Mm-hmm.
Say, hey, it looks like a test was changed on master. Here's a piece of code to fix that, and now your branch is back up to date. So kind of the branch health, and so if we can fix some of these just pain problems around code review, as well as scale the idea that everyone's going to receive a really high quality review by default, that's probably one of the biggest opportunities as more code is written and quality bars don't want to be diminished.
Yeah, man. It's so fascinating to hear you talk about these systems at such a scale, considering like it feels like just a giant version of the same things that I'm doing on my own. So like to hear it's so affirming in a way to know that like these are the systems that work at this type of scale, and it's also fascinating how you guys are essentially reducing latency there. You're reducing that latency to iterate, to fix all that stuff. And this is kind of like a broad question, but what's the one tool in your arsenal right now that gets like the most bang for buck?
I mean, so yeah, Claude Code is just such an amazing tool. And I'm going to go back to that because it's a great primitive. And the way that we've kind of brought it to Coinbase is we have our own internal list of models that we've kind of allowed, and they're provided through a light LLM proxy, and we're able to configure that with our tools. And so Claude Code is it's very portable. We're able to use it in GitHub Actions, like I mentioned. We're able to use it in containerized environments and scripted environments, and you're able to provide so many different pieces of context to it, and it's this kind of puzzle piece that just fits in so many different systems. We want to build more advanced triaging bots for, hey, our Sentry instance picked up an error and Claude Code picked it up, tried to work on it, and here's a PR for it. I think those types of systems and interactions have a great future in front of us and reduce the latency like we're talking about. So a new bug is detected. Instantly, we're able to kind of string together these automations, and the Claude Code is probably one of the best, well-maintained, featureful pieces of software that are out right now. I haven't had the same experience with Codex or I guess other offerings on the market. But that said, we kind of need tools that are specialized to models. I think Claude fits that really nicely. And I think perhaps the entire developer ecosystem right now is just banking on Anthropic being a long-term competitive partner here. We hope that, hey, just keep creating a great tool that lets us write code. But what if we get to a day where that support runs out and we don't have a tool that's built quite as ergonomically around a model? A little bit of a risk. We kind of felt that with GPT-5 coming out, that okay, what's going to be the right tool here? Cursor is working on this problem as well. They want to be more than an IDE. They're offering a full suite of different integrations with their Cursor agent.
Man. And what about cost for all of this stuff as well? Like, are you sensitive to how much this costs, or are you all just on the $29 a user per month or whatever? Or are you like straight up API requests spending thousands of dollars on a feature?
So costs are an interesting one. A broad statement right now is relative to the cost of an engineer's time. Model costs are just, it's not quite there. So we want to let engineers use the model that they think is the right tool for the job. This is, I think, still a gap in the tooling is why am I as an engineer having to think about not only the problem I'm solving, but what model do I send it to? What tool do I use? What context window? These are all little problems that I think are going to be ironed out over time. I think there's AMP code in the space that's doing a really nice job here, having an oracle that kind of decides what is the best model to use for a task. And yeah, the cost optimization is not something that I'm necessarily concerned too deeply about today. I think clamping down on Opus overusage in certain environments is definitely something that to keep an eye on. But with Cursor, we've been able to work out some pretty good cost controls, some good kind of model management features, and
that's good. And what about security as well? Is it fine just to be sending Coinbase's code to these random models? You guys feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think every org should be comfortable with the zero data retention model. Every model provider is doing this, and I think where it gets a little fuzzy is different integrations having indexing and having some sort of like database persisted of I guess context that is provided to them.
Yeah,
that's the messy part that we have to go through our due diligence with every time we work with a different tool.
Yeah, I didn't think that you didn't think about security, but people are. I'm sure anytime you talk about, especially when you talk about something that has money, essentially a bank, people are.
Yeah, I mean,
security,
just to like double click on that point a little bit more. I've been so impressed by the level of diligence with our security teams, and I think the willingness to move at a speed that lets us keep up with this ecosystem. This is a very fast-moving ecosystem. We've worked out a framework of where risks are. I think a year or two ago, or AI was very spooky. It was we don't want it to train on our data. We don't know where the data is going. We need data controls to make sure the right types of data is going into AI. And I think now we have a really mature framework that limits any sort of exposure. Yeah, the teams just ultimately need to get comfortable with certain model providers. I think we have a whitelist internally of essentially what models we've deemed appropriate based on some kind of analysis, and we don't use any models that are, I guess, excluded from that list.
So I would imagine you guys are tuning these systems constantly. Like, how often are the knobs being tweaked on these systems that you're implementing?
I think it really depends on the system and the technology. So we don't do much fine tuning. I don't think developer productivity is a place that necessarily warrants fine tuning. I think there's other parts of the business that it makes a lot more sense. Some of our compliance controls and ML teams, the work that they're doing on the kind of fine tuning, tweaking, turning the knobs. I think managing context windows is one of our daily tasks. Are you just providing a single query that you want really finite results for, or are you providing just a giant piece of context for the model to iterate through? So that's one challenge. And then some of our more bespoke systems, so some more lang chain, lang graph agents, you can mess with temperature controls and kind of different interpretations, and you're kind of creating a persona at that point, and that's where a lot of the tuning comes in. Have you guys created any agents with I guess LangChain or Mastra, any of the kind of like agentic frameworks?
No, I haven't. I've been mostly just like augmenting mine into death as I go. Yeah, just my Claude agents or my open code agents. I'm just tweaking them constantly, but I haven't been using any outside tools other than those.
I was just gonna say it's kind of a fun prototype space to be in, though, right? With Claude Code, where it's this thing that you can just like manipulate in different ways. You can add bash scripts around it.
It's endless, and it's actually become a problem for me because I'm just constantly messing with it instead of building with it. So, yeah,
it's a hard part. And kind of on that point, I wanted to talk about using AI as part of the application. So this whole thing has been talking about using AI to write code. And I feel like we don't necessarily talk about like putting AI in the application itself. And you said one of your tenets was AI should never make a decision. which means that like, yeah, you probably shouldn't put that as part of some of your flows. But like at Coinbase, what does it look like for people who say, instead of having to build some sort of algorithm for this or a function to work, can we just throw it to an AI and come back with the result?
Yeah, it's outside of my scope primarily. What broadly the suggestion has been is, and we have a lot of controls around this, where if you plan on there being some sort of AI touching any sort of the customer journey, there's a very long process to kind of go through to enable that, because we want it to be highly accurate, for it to be essentially scaled in the right way. So that's a very different problem set. I actually think one really interesting area that I haven't seen us leverage yet. You can do the on-device SDK, so you can use the Apple Intelligence through an Expo SDK now. And I don't have any good use cases quite yet, and I don't know how you do things like observability, and I have so many questions about it. I would love to try to use it in a personal project or something.
Man, the one example I always give people, I'm big on like the on-device or the smaller model that is good for one thing, but just like one simple example is we should be done with date pickers. We should be able to just type in the last 3 months, and like, and anytime I talk about this, people are like, well, there's a library that's pretty good at regexing it. Like, no, those things are hot garbage. I built one, and I want to say the last game that Michael Jordan did until 3 weeks before someone specific was born. I want to be able to type in literally anything I want, and for it to grab the information, figure that out, and bring those into Unix timestamps for me.
And for me, it's spelling, Wes. For me, like, Google is still the best spell checker, because whatever machine learning they're doing in spelling, right? Like, Apple spelling, you could be one letter off, and it's like, I don't know, suggestions.
Yeah, you got to copy paste it into Google to find the real spelling.
Right, yeah. Come on.
So I think all problems boil down to forms again. It's like, if we're taking forms online, are you saying we should just, all these forms should just be AI inputs now?
The whole thing about the future of UI in general, and okay, we have all these bespoke UIs. I love bespoke UIs, but like, you always have to learn them. You have to figure them out. When ultimately you're trying to accomplish a task, like, what does that look like, right? I don't know. There's too many head explodey things there when you get into too much of everything becomes a chatbot.
I think there's an opportunity here to create an open source library that's just, boom, a single form that says, hey, tell me about yourself.
Yes.
How many days after the Super Bowl were you born?
Yeah.
Boom. And that's your validation. Send it off to a backend server.
Oh, that'd be great. Anything we haven't touched upon yet that you'd like to talk about?
The developer journey is really the biggest piece of what we're focused on. Lines of code is exciting. Like I mentioned, it's an output metric today. All the input metrics that kind of go into how someone does their job day to day. We're in this crazy time where we don't want to put too much of a microscope on that, or try to massage that story too much. And I think AI is simply a tool at the end of the day. It's not going to replace what developers are making decisions on. It's not a magic bullet that's going to solve every problem universally with the right ergonomic or success output. There's been some cool studies online, like the what was the meter study? I don't know if you guys saw that one, but it was they sampled 15 or so open source developers on how AI impacted them, and it ultimately produced some negative results, saying, hey, it didn't make us faster. In fact, it made us slower. And digging into that study a little bit was really interesting, because you learn, okay, there's some senior staffish level engineers who are just mandated to use AI for every task, and that actually slowed them down. So it's not something that I think we can dictate to every engineer across our company, across any company, and say you have to use AI 100% of the time. It's not going to be right. And ultimately, what I hope for in the next 3, 4, 5 years, especially as we're hiring more entry-level engineers, is that we have AI natives. So I want to see folks who, come to Coinbase saying, this is the model that, I prefer to use. This is the tools and kind of the workflow that I really like to, work with. How can Coinbase fit that for me? Yeah, like I think we're going to get to a place where there's more AI natives, I guess, than there are people who are just poking at it in different ways.
Yeah. And I saw something the other day where someone said, if you want to get hired, like you're going to come to a job interview with your backpack full of these 20 agents that you built, and they're going to want to hire you because you're bringing the guns. Do you think we would get to a spot where we hire somebody because they got the sauce?
I mean, yeah. Haven't we always kind of done that in some ways of, show me your GitHub profile.
Yeah.
Show me, we want to obviously bring on people who have the experience to solve the problem however they need to in a really high quality way. Yeah. I mean, on that backpack analogy, I think most jobs I've gone to, I've, transported around my bash profile or, all the kind of like little N files that you come with. And those were my productivity hacks. I think now I wouldn't be surprised if we start hiring engineers who say, hey, I have this agent that I use. Can we onboard them too?
Yeah, it's so funny, Wes, because that's such a good way to say that. Can I onboard this agent? But I remember when I got my job at Ford, one of the reasons why that interview went so well is when they came to me, I was like, I have this whole SaaS CSS toolkit. And they're like, I want that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
Same
a
thing.
good point, man.
All right, so now's part of the show where we get into sick picks and shameless plugs. Sick pick being something that you're just enjoying in life right now. Shameless plug, anything you want to plug. And just, Kyle, do you have a sick pick for us today?
I guess things that I'm enjoying in life right now. So I'm currently on my 4x4 sabbatical, and I'm just doing a ton of woodworking around the house.
Nice.
Oh, right on.
And it's going great. So I don't really have any sick picks here. Maybe the Ultra Shelf people are just creating these amazing floating shelf brackets. I don't know, but yeah, I think if you're a engineer, someone who develops in front of a screen all day, find some sort of thing to do with your hands is kind of my pitch to people. I've been doing pottery, woodworking, trying to do things very away from screens in my free time. Which is just such a dichotomy coming back on, and now we're just moving at the speed of light with agents. But it really helps to, I think, solve problems in a different way. So would recommend that. And then, excuse me, what was the second piece here?
Just anything you'd like to plug, yeah.
Shameless plug. I don't really have any plugs right now. I'm currently, really loving the developer ecosystem, seeing kind of what Cursor and those teams are doing. I think the plug I have is probably just to follow along. I think what Coinbase is doing with our agentic systems. We actually, are doing a lot in kind of the cryptocurrency agentic protocol sphere right now. And there's some really cool work being done around the X402 protocol with Cloudflare. I think this is going to unlock kind of a future of agentic payments and, how do agents kind of transact online? So yeah, I don't want to, necessarily shill it to everybody, but it seems like a really interesting space to start thinking about as you're building perhaps e-commerce or any sort of checkout steps. What if an agent were to interact with that, and how do they do that? How do you transact value between two individuals? Yeah, that's probably my plug for the day.
Sick, love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate this is such a fantastic interview. You're incredibly well spoken. It's I feel like we have been missing this context and this inside scoop in the industry. So I appreciate that you're able to come on here, and props to Coinbase as well, because every time we talk to these companies about hey, can you come on and talk about it? They're like, sorry, legal killed it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, love to share what we're building in the open. I've chatted with other eng leaders from different companies, and it's such an interesting time right now to be building. So glad I could share and kind of give a peek at what we're doing.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Massively interesting and valuable here.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.